That is right. That is one important aspect. Second thing is, in case the pilot has carried out a precautionary landing, the standard procedure would be to remain with the machine till such time as the bad weather passes away, and thereafter start up and make another attempt. But as of now, since considerable time has elapsed, maybe it has not struck. Again, like I said, maybe it hasn't struck them to mechanically or deliberately switch on the ELT.
Okay, so you're actually...
And of course...
Sorry, you're reading some signs of hope into that, saying that basically this could mean that there has not been a crash landing, that perhaps the pilot of YSR's chopper has actually managed to land safely in some part of that forest area. Let me get in Air Chief Marshal Krishna Swamy now. Sir, of course, so at this point we heard the Chief Secretary talking about low-flying aircraft that are being used, Sukhois that are being used. For our lay viewers who do not understand what difference that would make, how could the Sukhois help at this point?
Well, as you know that at night we can't see. That's why the helicopter search has been called off. The Sukhois have, well, some parts of that is classified, but generally to say is that it can map the ground by radar. Radar means.
And it can see at night.
Well, to an extent, it's a matter of interpretation. As you know, I mean, it has a characteristics where the metal objects have a greater reflection, and from there one can make out its shape and so on and so forth. And they also have a synthetic aperture radar. That means it can map as good as like a daytime, but using radar as the sensor. So they have these equipment on board, and in my own experience in the past, they have detected a naval helicopter which had ditched at sea. I'm talking about probably 4 or 5 years ago, using the Sukhoi 30 radar. So it has a very, very interesting feature, and we hope that it can
find some traces.
The issue is that it's a very large area where we are likely to cover, because
dense forest. In fact, we should play those pictures now of that forested area, dense forest, and many parts of it inaccessible with little mobile connectivity.
But the important issue is that where are we searching? You see, from the last point known, that is at 9:05 or 9:10 or whatever the time, that's the time he lost contact, but the helicopter could have continued to fly a certain distance, but in any direction, because he was avoiding weather. Normally in the helicopter, you avoid the rain, you avoid the clouds, and you generally fly with the ground on visible sight. So what you call it is a contact flying. You don't fly inside a cloud as you do in a fixed wing. So it's very common that helicopters try and avoid the clouds and the rain patches and so on.
But what Captain Bose was saying about how the fact that there was no Mayday signal may actually be a good sign.
Yes. Now the first part what I wanted to say is that it could be a very large area of uncertainty where the helicopter could be. It could be as much as 10,000 square kilometers. If you take a time and chart. So you've got to comb a very large area. That's one challenge. The other is about, of course, the Mayday signal. The Mayday signal, if it is transmitted on RT, that should have been somebody within the range of RT to have heard.
So it may not have got picked up.
So it may not have been picked up had he transmitted. And if others, I mean, there's nobody in the receiving range in the so-called line of sight, nobody would hear it.
That's an important qualifier.
Whereas the transmitter is a different piece of kit that the satellite picks up. So there is no so-called blinding possible.
Okay, I'll just come to you, Mr. Kola. I just want to go back for a minute to Hyderabad. Shashidhar Reddy, you were talking about how there is no fresh information, and of course everybody is still hopeful. But to some of the points that Renuka is raising, the fact that there was no satellite phone on board, and so on, what really happened? Is this something that you're concerned about as well, or right now is all the focus just on figuring all this out later, and the priority is just to trace down the Chief Minister somehow?
One thing that surprised me was that there were no satellite phones with the Chief Minister's party. In disaster management, in every district collector in the past were given at least 2 satellite phones to stay in communication should there be a power failure and all other modes of communications lost. But I believe these were withdrawn some time back because the same mode of communication was being used by some terrorist outfits. But then there were other options, and the state government should have immediately switched over to another provider and had this thing, because it's very difficult to imagine the Chief Minister of a state being left
without a mode of communication. Yes. Renuka, your thoughts on... sorry, Shashit, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Renuka, your thoughts on that? Of course, there will be a lot of analysis on response, on crisis management and all of that later. But just speaking of the essential...
later.
Speaking of the essential vulnerability of politicians who fly in helicopters all the time, especially during election season, I mean, there is, and we've had horrible tragedies in the past as well. Renuka?
Yeah, we've had, but I don't think it's right to label all helicopters as a dangerous thing. It's not, because with the right maintenance, it's about as risky as your car. If you drive a car, probably you have more car accidents than you do air accidents, and that's a fact. They'll become more visible because we've had the tragedies, and so we tend to associate choppers with bad accidents for politicians. But what politicians have to realize, and what we must take cognizance of, is that our power cannot overrule inclement weather. And if a pilot says we shouldn't fly, we mustn't. It doesn't matter if there are people sitting out there, because you're also risking the pilot's life and you're risking everyone who accompanies you with you.
That's a good point.
So that is something that politicians need to learn.
That's a good point, and we should also mention that it isn't just the Chief Minister. There are also 2 pilots on board that chopper. There is the Chief Security Officer of the Chief Minister as well as the Special Secretary. In fact, we'll be bringing up their names as well in just a moment. I want to go just for a moment to Sudeep Chakravarti, who's of course an expert commentator on the whole naxal phenomenon. Sudeep, from what we understand of the Nallamala area, this is something that was a naxal stronghold till about 1995, but is no longer the case. So what Home Ministry officials here are saying is that there is no real threat of the naxal factor. Would you share that assessment?
Well, yes, no, and maybe. Very quickly, the Nallamala area was not active with the Naxals up till 1995, but even up to 4 years ago. So to say that it was only Naxals were active there till 1995 would be misleading. With the information available at this point of time, it seems that it could be one of 2 things. We need to consider seriously, the gentleman